Hello, good evening. Good evening, I'm Rika Burnham, Head of Education, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome the museum educators of the City of New York and beyond, and those who are joining us online. And it gives me great pleasure to thank the Samuel H. Kress Foundation for its visionary support of education in our many museums, and we thank them in particular tonight on the very special occasion of the 2016 Samuel H. Kress Lecture in Museum Education at the Frick. And finally, it gives me great pleasure to also introduce the director of the Frick Collection, Ian Wardropper, who in turn will introduce our esteemed speaker. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Rika. Rika Burnham is a distinguished educator and has done so much to build up educational programs here. I add my appreciation to the Kress Foundation, not only for underwriting this lecture series, but for consistently supporting educational, library, and curatorial programs over the years. It's my honor to welcome Carmen Fariña. She is Chancellor of the New York City Department of Education, the largest school district in the United States, serving 1.1 million students in over 1,800 schools. During her 5-decade career, she has distinguished herself as an innovative teacher, principal, district superintendent, and deputy chancellor. A Brooklyn native, she holds Bachelor of Science from New York University and 3 master's degrees from Brooklyn College, bilingual education, Fordham University, gifted arts education, and Pace University, administration and supervision. Among many publications, she is co-author with Laura Koch of A School Leader's Guide to Excellence, Collaborating Our Way to Better Schools, published in 2008. She is the recipient of many prestigious awards, including the Sloan Public Service Award, given in 1989, presented annually to exemplary civil servants. We're delighted to welcome her back to the Frick. Earlier in her career, when she was one of New York City's most successful principals and superintendents from 1991 to 2001 at PS6 in Manhattan, this good school rose from 76th on the citywide reading test to among the top 3, becoming one of the city's best public elementary schools. She achieved this remarkable turnaround by visiting each classroom daily, encouraging teachers to share best practices, and enhancing staff training. One of her projects, starting in 1995, was to collaborate with senior curator Susan Galassi to bring students from PS6 and 3 other schools to the Frick. They developed a curriculum and structure for gallery visits and classroom activities. This was the first such program in this institution, now a regular feature with many schools participating. But we could not have done this without Carmen, and it led to the hiring of our first educator and the creation of a Department of Education. As she was so instrumental in the development of education at the Frick, we are delighted to welcome her back, and all of us look forward to her talk, The Essential Role of the Arts in Public Education. Please welcome Carmen Fariña.
Today I'm actually going to read from notes so I don't forget everything, but hopefully we'll have time for Q&A later. Thank you, Dr. Wardropper, for that wonderful welcome, and my thanks to Rika Burnham and the museum, educators, teachers, professors, and teaching artists who are committed to delivering high-quality art education. It's a pleasure to deliver the Samuel H. Kress Lecture at one of my favorite collections in New York City. Viewing exceptional works of art in this gilded mansion always soothes my spirit and inspires me. I particularly love to go to the Turners and to the Whistlers, where I always feel that I've entered into another age, and many times on my job, I need to be here on a daily basis. I then go to sit in the concert garden, where in the middle of the bustle and hustle of New York City, it gives you a soothing experience, and many, many of our children deserve that soothing experience, and they certainly don't have it in their personal life. There's an additional beauty in being in the Frick. When I was a principal in PS6, I worked with this institution to create a teacher's guide at a time when children under the age of 10 were not welcomed. And I'm thrilled to say that now that's the exception, not the rule. In researching my curriculum, I immersed myself in the history of Henry Clay Frick. And I remember Susan saying to me, remember, he had good qualities, not all the bad qualities. And I kept reminding her that for kids, it's the gossipy items that get them. And for example, to this day, I still remember that he kept an organist, and he slept here, the organist. So every time he wanted music, even in the middle of the night, he could get the organist to come and play for him. And to me, that's one of the beauties of coming to a place like this, because it has a history, there was a person involved with it, and every time I brought students here, I always told the gossipy stories. I'm especially honored to speak to you this evening because the arts have always played a very important part in my personal and professional life. My parents came from Spain during the Spanish Civil War. They had no more than a third-grade education. Despite their lack of a formal education, they understood the value of arts in our cultural history. As a child, they taught me about Spanish music and dance. To this day, I think Ravel's Bolero is a lullaby because my father would play it. And what we used to call a Victrola, I mean, I'm going back a long time, right? Some of you may remember that. Picasso's Guernica was another touchstone for me. I first experienced the painting at the Museum of Modern Art and had a second chance to see it at the Prado in Madrid when Picasso allowed it to go back to Spain after Franco was no longer a dictator. Talk about a college course in one painting. My dad made me memorize every single feature of that painting, what it stood for, and to this day I still remember it's in black and white because Picasso wanted it to make a news statement. And as a result, I think I've read every book on that. I've grown up listening to my father's stories about his life in Spain and the politics and history of his home country, especially the fight for a democratic Spain. Through Guernica, I learned about my family heritage, about war, destruction, and a loss in a way that was palatable and real. No textbook can give you the history of a country the way a good art piece can. My early exposure to painting and photography, music, theater, and dance taught me the arts could enhance anyone's life. Later, as a teacher, principal, and superintendent, I made it my mission to integrate the arts into every aspect of students' academic life. Today, as Chancellor, I share Mayor de Blasio's commitment to high-quality education for all our students. The Mayor and I are adamant that arts education is not an add-on or a frill. The arts are an essential part of children's holistic education. This year, in line with this vision, we've added an additional $23 million to provide greater access to arts in all our schools. We currently have the most art teachers in a decade. Through our Arts Matters initiative, new arts teachers are serving over 22,000 students in 113 middle and high schools in classes that did not previously exist. And by the way, I also have to say that one of my emphasis is middle school students in particular, because if you don't catch seventh graders in the art of doing something good and productive, they will never get to high school and be productive. So therefore, many of our programs are focused on our middle school students. We are providing unprecedented professional development for teachers in all disciplines, from dance and music to theater, visual arts, and the moving image. One of the most popular programs we have now is in dance. Everyone wants a dance studio, everyone wants a dance teacher, everyone wants to move instead of doing physical exercise in other ways, but it really is something that if there is a demand, we need to fill it. Our investment of the arts is one of the ways we're increasing equity and excellence across the school system. I want to discuss 5 ways in which the arts play an essential role in education, borrowed lightly from Jane Reamer, esteemed art historian. First, art for its own sake. The poet Keats wrote, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever." Every museum represented here today has something beautiful in their collection that brings joy to my life. The Museum of Modern Art, the Sculpture Garden, nourishes my soul. One of the first places I took my youngest grandson, I said, Abuela, I didn't know places like this existed. I think he was about 5 at the time. And we ended up having lunch. I can't underestimate enough how having a good restaurant in a museum also adds value to the experience. Metropolitan Museum of Art's Astor Chinese Garden Court brought many Zen moments to my life as a principal of PS6. when I took on the job of PS6, my illusion was, little did I know, that on my lunch hours, I was going to be able to run to the museum on a regular basis and get to know it really well. Little did I know that I would never have a lunch hour, and that when I ran to the museum, it was an act of desperation so that I can sit in the Astor Court and feel the soothingness of that place and make me be able to go back to my job and do it well. To me, the museum also provides an experience with my grandchildren that cannot be duplicated anyplace else. Our go-to exhibit is Knights in Shining Armor, and I always tell parents, don't try to do a whole museum. Do one small section over and over again so it becomes like home. For me, the opera Carmen, for obvious reasons, energizes and inspires me. The Brooklyn Museum, is anyone here from the Brooklyn Museum today? The Brooklyn Museum played a very special part in my life as well, because when I was a staff developer, one of the things I realized during doing a survey is that many teachers, and obviously I taught in Brooklyn most of my life, did not know much of their own art history in their cultures. So we created these Saturdays with Studio in the School, Arts Connection, and the Brooklyn Museum, where teachers would spend a Saturday voluntarily studying a specific art and historical components. So we had Africa Day, we had China Day, and as part of that day, almost 100 teachers would come, free on their own volition, to a Saturday, where they'd be exposed to that museum and their exhibits, but also a dance experience and an art experience, and then teaching packets to go back and take it back to their schools and do it with their students. And it was one of the art experiences that I still remember, because teachers actually cried at the end of the day, and they said, this is the first time that I saw myself and my history through this experience. The point I'm making is that art has its own value and can be enjoyed apart from the themes it might address, whether social, moral, historical, political, or religious. Art in its finest form transcends all the distractions in our daily lives and allows us moments of bliss. That is something hard to come by sometimes in New York City. Likewise, arts elevates school communities. I visit schools every single week, and most principals will tell you the first thing I notice is whether the arts are integrated into the DNA of the school. From the minute I step in a school, I know if I'm going to have a good time or a bad time. And the word has spread, so sometimes they put out art that they think I'm going to like. I want to see painting, drawing, writing happening in classrooms. I want to see students bursting with curiosity and creative energy. I want to see imagination soar, and I want to see messiness. The cherry on the top, seeing parents explode with pride as they watch their children express themselves in a play, in a dance performance, in a concert, or through painting, film, or photography experience. I always tell principals that arts are a sure way to ensure parent attendance at any event. These experiences aren't optional. All children must have opportunities to dance and be moved to joy or even despair. All children should experience the dedication, discipline, and collaborative joy of performing in a musical ensemble. Recently, I had the privilege of awarding teachers in New York City the Big Apple Awards, and we went to one school in the Bronx, and the teacher was a samba band dance teacher. Paul, was that an experience? And I asked the students in the group, what did they learn from playing this music? And one of them said, it's very hard, and we have to practice and practice and practice. And I said, well, what does that remind you of? He says, well, school. But it's the idea that in order to be good at something, you have to practice and you have to focus, and that translates to academic excellence as well. All students must have opportunities to participate in theaters and lose themselves in a character's passion or despair. We also want to enable more of our students to experience live theater on Broadway. One of the things I'm proudest of as Chancellor is that this year, in conjunction with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Gilder Lerner Institute of American History, we are giving 20,000 11th graders the experience of seeing Hamilton on Broadway. And for students, it's bringing history alive in a way that no textbook can. But nobody that works with me knows you get something for nothing. Therefore, students must study about Hamilton. We have professional developers going into the school and working with the teachers of these 11th graders. By the way, the 11th graders that I choose, they're bribes. There are reasons why I pick the students who get invited, and they're generally students in Title I schools who are co-located in campuses, and the principals have to work together in order to win the tickets. One student said to me, I heard stories, watched the Tories, and understand what they were fighting for. I read all the reviews on the play, and however, none of it was as good as seeing the play in person. And you should also know that in order to see the play, the students get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. They, in each of their individual schools, compete for who's going to represent their school on the stage, and the students do raps or monologues or whatever they want, and Lin-Manuel sits there and cheers them on, and in one case recently actually walked on the stage when one of the kids froze and acted the rap with the kids, something he will never, ever forget. This also shows students how one person can come from a country, be an orphan and an immigrant, and be successful in New York City. And this is another lesson that they will take back with them, and no textbook is going to translate that in the way it should. Lin-Manuel actually cried at the last performance because what the students did and said was so impressive, and all the other performers are on the stage with the kids towards the whole morning, even before they see the play in the afternoon. The arts can motivate, they can inspire, they can keep you in school for a long duration. The second essential role of the arts is an appreciation and execution of technical skill. I myself do not have much technical skill, but I appreciate it in others, and for many of our students, the technical skill is the skill that they have, and it is the skill that's going to bring them reward and recognition. Through the arts, our children learn how to rehearse, edit, and revise, all in the pursuit of mastery. The concept of revision and do-over are often difficult to explain to students. Art makes this reality immediate and impossible to avoid. In an English class, a student will say, I have to rewrite it again, I have to do it again, I have to correct it again, and yet a child that's involved in a theater production, in a music production, is not going to complain because they know that doing it again is what's going to bring you the adulation and the applause that is important for a successful production. There are critical life lessons for students in every art form. They're so important, in fact, that they're embedded into our standards-based, rigorous approach to teaching the arts. Our standards, which we call the Blueprints for Teaching and Learning in the Arts, help teachers develop curriculum in their art form and provide benchmarks for what children should be able to know. This is standards-based. This is not easy work. This is not anything goes. This is quality. I get very upset when parents say, well, anybody can do that. Not in a really rigorous arts education. You have steps to follow. There is grading, and quality matters. For many of our students with special needs, technical skills are academic skills. The motor coordination a child develops while drawing or finger painting translates directly into classroom activities that handwriting. And I actually just got a real lesson in this as a grandmother, well, as my grandchildren call me. My youngest grandson was just diagnosed and has an IEP, and the recommendation was to be involved in as many arts activity as possible because the motor coordination from arts activities translates immediately into better speech development. So this is something that is crucial. Our blueprints also highlight the ways teachers can integrate arts into other contents. Social studies is a natural partner. I taught social studies probably 5 hours of my teaching day, and there wasn't any lesson I taught that did not have an art connection. The blueprints also provide school administrators with tools to supervise arts teachers and share feedback with parents so they can understand their child's potential for achieving in the arts. We want parents to understand that a child whose artwork is displayed, who plays in a band, sings in a chorus, or acts in a play is a child who has a potential to live an extraordinary life. For some of our special ed students, that is particularly important. And for our children who do not speak English or English language learners, there is no reason why they can't excel in any single art form. The poise, self-confidence, and technical expertise students develop through the arts prepare them to excel in life and in school. Putting a child on a stage, putting them in front of an audience to display their artwork, creates a sense of confidence that is translated to every other aspect of life. Third essential role of the arts is a way of understanding historical context. I believe that one of the best ways to help students make sense of the world in which they live is to integrate the arts into all aspects of instruction, but particularly history and social studies. When I was a fourth grade teacher, I could not imagine teaching any history unit without integrating the arts into the era. There's no better way to give students a complete and human picture of the times. When we studied the American Revolution, I discussed the portraits Gilbert Stuart, who immortalized the wealthy and the powerful, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Jacob Astor, and King Louis XV of the 16th of France. I asked my students, why do famous people have their portraits painted? One of the students said, because the rich need to show off their wealth. Just a little bit true. Simply by observing artwork, students learned important lessons about the American Revolution. I also used the works of the Spanish painter Diego Velázquez to deepen students' understanding of history. If I had to think about it now, I don't know if I would let teachers that do what I did in those days, but there was a wonderful book called Ay Juan de Pareja, which is the story of Velázquez and his painter. And one of the things that Velázquez and many of the Spanish painters did was actually paint crucifixions, because the more crucifixions you painted, the more religious you appeared to be at a time during the Inquisition. So it kept you free from being put in jail and whatever. And that was the discussion I had actually with fourth graders and sixth graders. Today, I don't know, I think we'd have to be a little careful about that. Types of experience, these learning experiences are critical for our students, and they continue today. Through an after-school program called Teen Thursdays, one of my very favorite, and Paul, I should have given you credit. Paul King is my head of arts at the DOE, and I'm thrilled to have him here because none of these things could be done without him and his team. Our middle schools, our students are taking advantage of rich learning opportunities at the city's premier institutions. Many of you here, how many of you participate in Teen Thursdays? Okay. Teen Thursdays came out of an idea that I had that adolescents work best in museums when there are very few other people there, and they don't have to do it as part of a school assignment. So we asked cultural institutions, and I believe we're up to 40 of them in the city of New York who volunteered, to have adolescents, basically seventh graders, in their institutions after school in groups, in smaller groups, from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And what they do there, come with their teachers. In some cases, a few principals show up, especially if they know I'm going to come by as a surprise visitor. And the students get to really experience over a period of 4 or 5 weeks, in depth, some aspect of American history. And I remember going to the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens to see one of these groups of students that came. And I said to the students, what are you learning here today? By the way, they didn't know who Marilyn Monroe was. They were looking at a picture and they were mesmerized by Marilyn Monroe. And the students said, I love what I'm doing, but I like the fact that I have my teacher's full attention. And guess what? The principal came too. So how do you get a student in a museum and let them explore this with without everybody running around? They were sitting on the floor, they were talking about what they were seeing, and to me it's an image that will stay with me for a while. I also did the same thing at the Wicksville Heritage Center in Bedford-Stuy, and also after school, no one there except the students and their teachers. And these were students who live in Bed-Stuy, and many of which said to me, the first time I'm here. And they had invited their parents and their teachers. And to me, museums should be living places and places where students really have even deeper conversations about what they're seeing. Part of our mission is to share these experiences with families as well. Last week, I joined parents for 2 events at El Museo del Barrio. The vast majority of parents were of Hispanic descent, and they were thrilled to have the opportunity to learn about their own personal heritage. Very often, many of our immigrant families feel that they come to this country and they have no history behind them. Going to a museum and seeing very purposefully their own heritage out there in display in points of honor is a very important entry point for many of them into our school system. If we are to keep cultural institutions alive and well as repositories of our history, it's important that we create future patrons. Throughout the centuries, most patrons have come from the elite classes. It's time to focus on a more diverse community of patrons. Fourth essential role of the arts is as a tool for democracy and responsible citizenship. This is not one of Jane's, this is one of mine. Like you, I'm thrilled to see tourists flock to New York City arts and cultural institutions. I would say a good number of visitors here today, because I met them on the way out, were from other countries, several of them from Spain. We got engaged in a conversation. In my travels, I too visit cultural institutions, and what I observe is important about how I see other cultures. With history, democracy can be taught through art, analyzing Washington's crossing of the Delaware, Winslow's Homer's battlefield scenes during the American Civil War. Songs, too, are a powerful way to learn about our democracy. When Johnny comes marching home, dissecting it and what war means and doesn't mean to a culture, I think is very important. America the Beautiful, analyzing it and singing it really can also raise patriotism. I encourage all teachers to use the arts to promote civic responsibility and awareness, and to teach students to care about themselves, their community, their country, and the world writ large. The arts are not a frill. The arts are not an ancillary curriculum. The arts tell the world who we are as a people. That's how we promote our values, beliefs, and responsible citizenship. Now, more than ever, we need to use the arts to ensure that we have a democracy that our great-grandchildren will enjoy in the future. This leads me to the fifth essential role of the arts, and it is as a career choice. We all know that New York City attracts some of the most talented and productive citizens in the world. Brilliant museums, musicians, painters, dancers. We are the hub for the arts and entertainment. How can we not do this in our schools and limit the career choices for these students in the future? But careers also are museum educators, curators, press and PR people, stage technicians, the list goes on. Yesterday I have something called Carmen's Classroom, where once a month I bring people to Tweed so that the people who work at Tweed understand why they're working there. And we actually had people who had worked from the Ghetto Film School to demonstrate the students who worked here at the Frick to develop their movie. And these students were the most eloquent presenters of their experience here. And two of them now are looking at careers in media as part of the experience here. We believe students will be better prepared for careers in the arts if we begin exposing them to career options early in their lives. Just like we've expanded pre-K for over 68,000 four-year-olds, we're building a better arts foundations for our younger learners. Through Studio in the School program, students in our pre-K programs are learning to create using clay, collage, paint, and wood construction. They're exploring color, shape, texture, dance, theater. A four-year-old is theater personified. They are actually on the stage on a regular basis, whether they know it or not. Children are natural creators and can make the most complex connections than most adults give them credit for. At a pre-K in the Bronx, four-year-olds produced amazing graphic paintings on climate change. I'm sure many of you have read articles on climate change. I urge you to visit this pre-K. One of the arts had a polar bear with one foot on an iceberg, a lot of water, and trying to get the other foot on the other iceberg, but obviously a lot of stuff melting. That's climate change through the eyes of a four-year-old. Pre-K art also serves as a very productive assessment tool. We can actually use children's performance in the arts to gauge how they will do academically and target early supports. I learned as a superintendent early in my career that I could walk into any kindergarten class at the time and analyze quickly. It takes me 5 minutes to see 30 art pieces by a kindergartner and tell you which 5 kids are going to have academic problems, like that. And we're really looking at the arts. Which child goes on a stage and dances, and all the kids go this way, and one goes that way? Instantly, you will have an assessment about what that child needs more support in. And we need to use the arts in assessment in a very productive way. Middle schools in our Broadway Junior Musical Theater program produce a 1-hour musical culminating in a final sharing on a professional stage, and usually on Broadway. Can you imagine what that does to those students when they go on that stage? We're encouraging middle schools to partner with elementary schools to ensure that our students have 4 to 5 continuous years of art experience. You know, it was wonderful. Middle schools would have a band, and the elementary schools would have maybe a visual arts teacher, a dance teacher. We're saying to schools, talk to each other And if you have a really strong arts program in 3rd grade, why not have a feeder middle school that continues the same art form? So these students at the end of 8th grade really have a body of knowledge of something they can do very, very well. 10 high schools now are participating in our SING program, where students write, cast, rehearse, and perform in a musical variety show and compete to win Best Act. I was in the audience as 3 Brooklyn high schools, the 3 M's as they call them, Midwood, Madison, and Murrow, did a sing-off, and each of the schools competed with each other. And it was up to me. I would make sing a varsity sport, and I would give these kids varsity letters. We have many high schools that are the best in the country, not just the city, that produce some of the best performers you can imagine. Brooklyn High School of the Arts, Frank Sinatra School for the Arts, LaGuardia High School, and Music of Arts and of the Performing Arts. These are the students who are going to be the performers of the future, and they need schools that are special for them. To ensure that our students have the knowledge and skills to achieve their potential in the 21st century, we have also infused the arts into many of our CTE, Career and Technology and STEM programs. Both STEM and the arts begin with an idea and come to fruition through creative thinking, good design, technical skills, and a whole lot of perseverance. I put out a contest in one of our schools out in Staten Island to create posters for 18-year-olds to vote in November. And I gave them an assignment. It's a graphic arts program. And I said, rather than us create the program, you guys do it. And I just saw today the 5 final products that were done in teams. And you're going to see these throughout New York City, because we have a tendency to go out and hire people to do this for us. And I kept saying, if we have graphic arts programs in our schools, why not use our own kids to develop it? After all, they are the 18-year-olds. They know what's going to make people go out and vote. So when you see these programs, you'll know it was all done in a public school. Through Computer Science for All, one of our new equity and excellence initiatives, students can participate in hackathons, design-a-thons, creating amazing digital posters and video games. That, too, is an art form. In the classroom, the arts can come together. Just watch students incorporate animation design into a biology class, and you'll never view art or biology quite the same way again. I was in a school recently where the principal told me that adding an animation course to his after-school program increased his attendance that day of the week 10%. So my answer to him was, well, now you should have it every day of the week so you can figure out how to get the attendance up Monday through Friday. Most importantly, students are gaining real-world skills that will serve them well in college and future careers. The extraordinary programs our schools are created don't stop when school ends. Because we know that learning should continue, we created the Summer Arts Institute, tuition-free, intensive arts programs for public school students in grades 8 to 12. Students in these programs work with educators, cultural organizations, and guest artists to build their portfolios and strengthen their audition skills. This is particularly important in high-poverty neighborhoods where many parents do not have the money to pay for the tutorial and the portfolio putting together, or may not be in arts-focused schools, but are very talented in the arts. Summer Arts Institute was so successful that we expanded it and opened the Summer Audition Boot Camp, and I love that title, Paul, to prepare middle school students for audition schools. In the same way that we're increasing our training for minority students to apply for the specialized high school exams, and we're starting in 6th grade, why not prepare our students to prepare for the audition programs in our specialized arts schools? This partnership with Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall, and Student in School gives students who are on the cusp concrete audition portfolio supports. The programs I've described barely scratch the surface of our offerings, but I hope they paint a picture of a school system committed to providing all students access to great arts education and talented and passionate arts teachers. This leads me back to you, representatives of the city's premier arts and cultural institutions here tonight. For those of you already partnering with us, we are grateful for your support. You help us bring essential arts education to our students and families, and I want to thank you for that. Our students and families are your future artists and art goers, and most importantly, patrons. If our families are not welcome into your institution at this stage in their life, when these students grow up, they are not going to be there for you. We need one another. So I encourage you to continue to support our arts initiatives. I encourage you to be more welcoming to some of our parents who often go to your doors and get intimidated either by the way they are greeted or in some cases the way they are not greeted. And if you don't have a partnership with our schools, I welcome your collaboration. Let us not forget that we live in a diverse city, a melting pot of cultures and ethnic groups, a city where the privileged and the underprivileged often live side by side. Unfortunately, not all members of our communities feel welcomed or comfortable or represented in the world of culture. We must do better because every student and every family should speak the language of art. Every student should know the joy of creating, designing, or performing for others. So let me end where I began. The arts are not an add-on. They are not a frill. They play an essential role in our public schools. We need you as our partners. With your support, we can provide New York City's 1.1 million students. It always scares me when they give me that high number to actually be, and I'm serving them, and ensure the widest possible audiences for your institutions. Thank you. It's been an honor to engage with the greatest arts community in the world. Thank you. I'm happy to take some questions. I'm happy to take some questions. Yes? Oh, I thought there was a question.
Hi. I was very glad to hear about what you said about Lin-Manuel Miranda and, of course, Hamilton and the project, which is outstanding, of course. But I'm a product of the city schools. I am not a teacher or have any association with it as an adult. But I've been told that the local history curriculum has been altered over the years so that there's very little taught, at least at fourth grade level, about the place in which the students live or the school in which they attend. And I wondered if you could address that and how that can be strengthened. So for the same reasons, if I may, that you spoke of the importance of the arts in the education, so is the importance of local history and for students to learn about the place in which they live.
Well, first of all, I would say in the last 2.5 years, we have put out curriculum guides in many areas. The social studies was the first one that I actually mandated be put out, because in the last few years, I haven't seen a lot of social studies in schools. And certainly I believe that you must teach the local history and you must teach American history over several years, not just in 4th grade, but 5th grade, also 7th and 8th grade. So we put out guides. In fact, they're going into all the schools in September, in every single school, and it is the one set of guides that we've put out that principals requested in unprecedented numbers. 90% of our principals requested the social studies guides, which they will be using. So there was, I think, a misunderstanding around Common Core in particular, that Common Core just meant, not science, well actually math and literacy. Without social studies and science, in my opinion, there's no deep literacy. Literacy comes out of learning and content areas. So we've done an awful lot. The other thing is, and thanks to many of you, many of our teacher workshops are now being done in cultural institutions. Because what we also found is that many of our teachers, and again, this is not about faulting, it's just the way it is, do not know their own history. And they did not have enough courses in teaching history to teach it to others. So I do think you can learn more in one day in a cultural institution about history, again, that you can from any book. So we're trying to do this many different ways. But we also put out a framework on STEM, on the science and technology, and we also revamped all our science curriculum so that there is a more robust approach to the teaching of science as well. Yes?
Thank you for your talk. I found it very inspiring. I'm a teacher in a high school, and I had the great pleasure of working with the Astor Educators Program at the Met this year that brought in 15 high school teachers, and we got to have PD and bring our students in. It was really amazing. And I've also worked with the Palazzo Strozzi Foundation that sends students in their junior year to go study the Renaissance in Italy. So that's an amazing program. But my question is, because I've been in 4 schools now, and this is only my 8th year of teaching, I found that on the real level, a lot of times when push comes to shove, that supervisors will choose test prep over arts education. And I find that so upsetting, and I also find that arts education gives kids different pathways to think about problems. So how, as the New York City Department of Education, will that message kind of be brought to schools and administrations, and how will it be, I guess I want to know, like, in the schools themselves, will there be that message, and will it stand as strong as what you spoke tonight?
No, and I think that's a very real problem. I think one of the things that we're saying also, this speech today, although what I just said is not even what was in the papers, but the original speech as written is actually being sent to every principal in New York City. So they're getting that, and they're getting a little PS from me as well. I think and understanding that principals are under pressure in terms of assessment, but I do think the key to good education, particularly in the high schools, but across all grades, is more collaboration among teachers from different curriculum areas. One of the things we've been doing, I know, Paul, you've been emphasizing, Anna's been emphasizing, is how does a social studies teacher, an ELA teacher, work together to ensure that all of you are working towards the same goal? Because we can no longer teach in isolation. The other big area is that we have now, in all our middle schools in New York City, bar none, we have free after-school programs. And we have said that in every middle school there should be at least one of those programs should be an arts program, and one should be some form of academic tutorial. So we're making that message very loud and clear. Also, when I go visit schools, the first thing I do ask principals, how many art teachers do you have? We actually have superintendents now. I'm taking them all on retreat next week. And one of the things we're going to say, when you visit a school, make sure that there's an even-handedness about what some of those programs are. So I am not going to be Pollyanna and say principals are not looking at the bottom line, sort of. But how do you, who do you get to come to your schools to help raise money? You put on a play. You put on the music. That's the value added, but to many principals, and I think this message is getting across, talent comes in many forms. You're going to have students who are going to ace the exams, who are going to do great, and they're going to go on to college. But then you're going to have students for whom the arts is going to be what they're very good at, and they need to feel good about themselves, and they need to be celebrated. So I think that's very, very important. Certainly in schools, and high schools in particular, there was an assumption for a very long time that you didn't have to put up art on the walls. It's okay for a school to look like a dreary office. And it's not okay. Students spend an unbelievable amount of time in their school buildings, and those environments should be pleasant. They should be owned by them, and what better way to own your environment than to have your work on display? And also, to some degree, it's what do you want to do with the rest of your life? When I say patron of the arts, I'm also saying, how are you going to spend your leisure time? If you're working, what are you going to do on Saturdays and Sundays? And to me, if we don't cultivate a culture-going public, we're not going to have the kind of informed citizens that we need. My difference, when I visit Europe, which before this job I used to do on a regular basis, there isn't anyone in most of the European countries that doesn't go to the museums, and they don't see it as a job, they don't see it as a homework assignment, they don't see it as, that's who they are, that's what they do. And in this country, it becomes something that we force ourselves to do, or, oh, do I have to do? So we need to get this, the arts have to start, like I said, in pre-K. I think this year, with our emphasis on arts in the pre-K, and this was something, once the pre-K curriculum was put in place, I said, well, where are the arts? And it all came to me one day when I went to visit a pre-K program, and I saw this child doing an art piece on a piece of paper a little smaller than this one. And I went totally bonkers. I said, where's the easel? Where's the big piece of paper? And I called, who do I call? I called Tom Cahill directly. I said, could you figure out how we do this? So he said, okay, let me talk to Aggie Gunn. And the next thing I knew, they gave us the seed money to start looking at the arts in a real way. And so if we started in pre-K and parents understand the value, they're going to insist that we have it in kindergarten, and then it's going to be a piece of cake by the time we got to high school.
Hi, thank you again for coming today. My name is Caitlin Holt. I'm a the program manager of Brooklyn Connections, which is a local history residency program based out of BPL's local history archive. We actually saw you yesterday. But my question is, it's very difficult for us to get the word out about our program to our schools. It's very much through word of mouth. And you had said that you're very open to collaborating with all of us. So what advice can you give us for getting the word out about the programs that we offer, and especially when they are residency-style programs that are free and have a lot to offer schools that partner with us?
You're probably talking Brooklyn Public Library?
Yes.
I was just there this week.
Yeah, I saw you yesterday.
I'm all over the city. Well, one of the things that we're doing, and I think certainly Linda Johnson, did the opening remarks, was we're trying something different. We did the same thing in Flushing. We're trying language-specific workshops for parents with English translation. In other words, we don't translate to we're doing the workshops in the native language. We've done it a whole day in Mandarin. We did this one in Spanish. I did the keynote in Spanish. It was a little bit effort on my part, but we got that done. So I'd say, first and foremost, look and see where your services are, and how do you make sure they're translated, or at least somewhat translated, so parents sense that welcoming. And also, we are going to start doing more fairs. We did one this year in the bringing cultural institutions so principals could see it. But the missing piece, as I see it right now, and we're going to do better next year, is getting this information out to parents. So our head of parent engagement, Yolanda Torres, actually working with several of the cultural institutions, and I know the Met has particularly helpful on this, we have asked them to host workshops for our parent coordinators. Most schools in New York City have a parent coordinator. And if you host, the Hall of Science did this for us magnificently last year, if you host something for parent coordinators, my deal is you can come, and then parent coordinators take other parents to visit the institutions based on what they've learned. And then what they usually do is give them a free ticket for everyone brings one more person. The other thing that I think in terms of helping, the Hall of Science once again opened to one borough in Queens, where 500 families went to an evening around STEM, and they got all the companies around there. They got JetBlue to do a lot of the exhibits. They got other companies involved to do this evening. They provided food. It was an unbelievable experience. So having cultural institutions, or I met with Linda, actually, Tony Marks and Dennis Walcott. How could the libraries help us more, particularly over the summer? And one of the things we talked about, how do we get the words out to parents that they're not only welcome there, but all the other services, like in terms of learning English. I mean, we looked a lot about this, but also the one place we started using more in the last year are faith-based organizations to get the word out. People are not going to come to you. You have to figure out where do they go naturally, and then you have to be there and then present that. So I would say translating a lot of your materials so that people can read it in their own language. And next year, one of the things, we talked about, Paul, I talked with Anna, is we have one day a year called the Chancellor's Day, where we bring principals from all over the city. We had almost 900 principals this year, having the cultural arts fair that day. So all the materials for the principals are available, and they can pick and choose what they do. But you also have to target it specifically to what the common core of the curriculum is. Most principals and teachers are not going to add on to what they have to do. So how does it fit into something that's already in their curriculum? I know, David, you do that particularly well with the puppets. And also target your audiences. I mean, one of the things that we're looking for more help in, and I think this is certainly, I know Marquis Studios did this, I know Arts Connection does this. How do you work with our English language learners? We need a lot more programs that are really geared to supporting language development with English language learners. So how does whatever service you provide, can you do it in another language, or can you talk about how your programs enhance language acquisition, vocabulary development? We're looking for that. The other piece that I think is really important is, again, small families. Next year we're going to do a big initiative, and this may be a little bit more controversial, but I don't shy away from controversy if it's going to get to me where I want to go. Men-only activities. We started an initiative this year, Daddy Donut Day, Men as Heroes, because what we found is that in schools, I mean, I don't have to, informal assessment. Look around the room today. who shows up for many of our things? The mothers, the grandmothers. And we really found that we need to draw more men so that this is seen as a manly thing. You know, going to a museum is a manly thing. Going and being involved in arts activities is a manly thing. So we're going to make a big effort next year to do more of that. The other big group, and I think the Met helped us with this, there may have been others of you. We did, I do my informal surveys. I do about 50 town hall meetings a year, talking to people. I don't think there's a community I missed this year. And what we found over time is that a lot more grandparents in New York City are raising their children than parents, a major number. You know, you say 10%, no, it's a lot more than that. And many of them are asking for help at many levels. They've raised their children maybe 20, 30 years ago, so this is a new thing for them. So what kind of books? So we did a workshop for them, Bank Street Bookstore. What are the new books? What are the ways that we use books? We found a lot of them are saying to us, and I don't know, Sandra, if I discussed this, but I know I discussed it with somebody, that we'd love to take our kids to museums, but we need a place to sit every hour on the hour. And being a grandmother, I get that. So how do you look at the diverse communities that we serve, and how do you tailor-make projects for them? And certainly we're doing a big initiative. We now have an advisory group that's comprised, it's called the Grand Connections, of just grandparents throughout the city to talk to us about how they want to work with their grandchildren. And some of the stories are really very touching. But one of the grandfathers said to me, you know, I'm raising 3 children and my health is not so good. So how can you help me be a better grandparent? So there are niche audiences that many of you can serve well, and find out what that audience is in whatever community. And I would say also try not to do too many things. Get really good at something, and then expand on that more and more.
Hi, my name is Leah. I'm a District 79 art teacher, so my students are trying to get their tests completed. I have city kids who are dropouts or who have left school incompleted, and ESL students. And my school is very unique because they have an art program, which is really, I get to see the really great part of the kids that some of the other teachers don't. And there's a lot of talented students. So art is, in our district, it's so important. This year, I had the honor to be in the Astor Educator program with the Met, with Nicola and Claire and an unbelievable team of teachers. And I think the most important thing that I learned, I've been teaching almost 20 years, so I've been to a lot of developments, and this is the first art development that really opens up my practice and developed me in such a positive way. And for me, the greatest thing about this was that we, besides our community, we were taught a kind of 3-tiered questioning on how to create questions for the students, for the lessons on what they're looking at. So I feel that just working from a piece of art, just telling people work from a piece of art is not enough. And I know there's a lot of different strategies out there. I'm working with art, but I feel like even though I'm very lucky that my principal and my assistant principal support art, as you were saying, I think it's still thought of as an extra, as a frill, and as much as they see the work and appreciate it in the writing, they don't, deeply understand that it's a tool for everything. That kind of question, teaching us how to question, it doesn't have to be art teachers, it's everybody.
I think one of the most important things, and this is something new in the teacher's contract that we're working through, teachers now have 80 minutes on Mondays for professional development. And what we've done with 3 different types of teachers, art teachers, phys ed teachers, and science teachers, and we're going to do more of this next year, we said the missing piece was that in many cases there's only one of you in a school, maybe 2. So you don't have anyone to talk to. So we asked our borough field directors to take on these 3 licensed areas and train them at the borough level so these teachers can talk to each other. So many of the boroughs have done it, some have done it better than others. So one of the things we're doing for next year is that we're going to create the master teachers in each of these 3 areas that will then be able to do workshops for other teachers. Because if you have an art teacher and she's great, where does she get the support? She has to go to the Met. She should be able to, not that you shouldn't go there, but we should be able to supply some of that within ourselves. I went to see something, I guess last week, we gave out awards for our phys ed teachers, the wellness, and without a doubt, when I asked them what was the best thing about whatever they did this year, they said the ability to actually meet with other teachers like themselves and share their best practices. And we haven't always done that. And if schools did a very good thing at something, then sometimes they kept it quiet because they didn't want someone else to steal it, which to me, if someone wants to steal your ideas, that's the highest level of compliment. So let them. I know one of the other things I'm suggesting, that the schools that are particularly capable in the arts don't always sell themselves the way they should. So, for example, Brooklyn High School for the Arts, which I love, I suggested that she now have 3 feeder schools, middle schools, that her kids go out and mentor to, so they'll start knowing that that school is there. Because a lot of schools don't sell themselves in quite the same way they should. So find a middle school that's close to you and take some of your students to go work with those students so you have those partnerships. I don't know what your time frame is, so, because I'm happy to stay around and mingle for a little bit. Okay.
Last year, I noticed that the libraries were inviting artists from the various boroughs to have their work displayed. And I thought that was a good idea, but I think the idea could have been pushed further if they had invited some of the school children with their teachers to be there when the artist was present. And I know that the artists were present, and they could have spoken at least about the creative process, because most of the time you go into a museum and the artwork is just there. You're not discussing the actual process of how the artwork was composed, even if that's the limited perspective of the artist. But I think that that would be an additional kind of thing to do. I went to the art exhibit. There was one on Christopher Street. There was another one on about 115th Street in Harlem. I went to a number of them just to, my friend was the artist, but I saw this as an opportunity, and I have another friend who's an artist, and I know they would be willing to do that for school children, and I think that's an aspect of art that should be developed.
Yeah, and I think at one time we used to do it in the banks. The Metropolitan now has PS Art. In the Metropolitan, children's artwork is actually hung up in the family rooms downstairs. We need to celebrate the arts in many different ways, and having kids do dance performances. I do think arts are alive and well this year in our schools. They will get better and better, but I think the one thing we need to also stress, they have to be high quality. And this is really important, because I think one of the reasons art sometimes gets a bad, not a bad rep, but people don't make it as important, is that, well, if it's art, anything goes. And once teachers in particular start saying to principals, you know what, it's not anything goes, there has to be almost a rating on the artwork. These are I'm hanging up, because I remember going to one school and the principal said, oh, you're going to be very happy, Carmen. When they say I'm going to be very happy, generally I'm not. This is going to be very happy because I have every single child's artwork hung up in this particular classroom. So I said, why? She looked at me like, I said, honestly, would you have hung up every piece of writing? Would you have hung up every science exhibit? No. You would have picked the best. That's not to say that not everybody deserves something hung up, particularly for parent-teacher conferences, but not everyone deserves to have the same thing hung up. And I think that's some message that has not quite gotten out there, that quality has to be as important as quantity. I think also what I see, particularly in the early grades, but I'm sure it's true in the upper grades as well, the best report card for a parent is having a child, first day of school, and I actually have done this in middle school as well, draw a self-portrait, just the first day of school. Then write something to accompany your self-portrait. Do it again in December. Do it again in April. The report card in June tells you what that child's technical skills have improved over time, what that teacher has imparted to that student that makes them feel better about themselves, and also a parent has a record of what has happened over time to that child in ways that only the parent can understand. So to me, art is a wonderful assessment tool. It's really something that says I'm building self-confidence, this is who I think I am. And self-portraits, over time, I still have all the ones that my daughters did over a period of years, and I can tell you what they were thinking when they did them. But I do think also the other thing, and we've said this a lot in our schools, and I know, Paul, you're working on this too, more parent workshops in the arts. Because parents think art is easy when the child, oh, anybody can do that. No, 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 no. Try to do a really good collage that has all the balances in it. So putting parents through workshops, we did that. When I was a principal, the parents who are in my school, there were a lot of things they thought either we shouldn't do a certain way, we should do a different way. And we made all the teachers do workshops where the parents had to do the work. And they said, oh, wow, this math is really hard. When they thought we were going easy, we were going harder. We were going to Turk math. And when we did arts programs, they said, wow, this is not as easy as it looks. When we're also saying that more of artwork should be collaborative, a lot of parents, well, you know, I don't know about, yes, it should be collaborative, but it's hard. If one person can't make up their mind about something, imagine having 3 people make up their mind. I know when you do your puppets, and that's part of the discussion. The skills you need for the future are not the skills you needed in the past. The future careers, no matter what the careers are, you need critical thinking. You need problem solving. You need kids who can analyze. You need collaborative people who work well with others. I mean, now more than ever, you know, which is very obvious if you read the papers. Those are skills that the arts teach particularly well. But that doesn't come out of a textbook. It doesn't come out of a test that you take with paper and pencil. So those are the skills we have to keep talking to people as how we're incorporating them into the arts. I know. So I'll be happy to stay around, okay? But thank you so much.